Here's the story from my perspective. Mark Davis, 38 years old, long-haul truck driver from Kansas. If you're watching this or listening to it somehow, don't scroll past. I need you to hear me out. People laugh when someone says the word UFO. They think it's all fake stories or some YouTube clickbait. But I swear to God, what I'm about to tell you happened to me. And maybe if I don't make it through this, at least someone will know the truth. So hit that like, leave a comment, do whatever you can, because silence is the only thing that keeps them strong. My name is Mark. I've been driving trucks since I was 21. I'm not some scientist, not some military guy, just a man who spends more nights on the highway than in his own bed. On September 14th, last year, something happened to me on Route 83 in Nebraska. It was around 2:30 in the morning. I had just passed a gas station near North Platte, and the road stretched empty. No headlights behind me. No towns ahead for miles. It was one of those nights where the sky feels too big, like you're the only living soul left on Earth. I had the radio off because static kept breaking through, so it was just the hum of the engine and the sound of my tires grinding the asphalt. That's when I saw it. First, I thought it was just a plane, a bright white light cutting across the stars, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. But it wasn't heading in a straight line. It zigzagged, stopped, then darted forward again. No plane moves like that. My stomach tightened, but I kept driving, telling myself I was just tired, seeing things. Then the CB radio in my truck crackled to life. Not with voices, with a sound low, metallic, almost like a deep hum that vibrated in my chest more than in my ears. The gauges on my dashboard flickered, and for a moment, the whole truck stuttered like it was about to shut off. That's when the light dropped. I don't mean it fell. Came down, directly in front of my truck, maybe 200 feet ahead, hovering just above the highway. A perfect sphere, glowing white with a faint bluish halo around it. I slammed the brakes so hard my trailer nearly jackknifed. The truck screeched to a stop, and I just sat there, gripping the wheel, heart pounding in my throat. The sphere didn't move. It just hovered, humming so loud now that the mirrors rattled. I reached for my phone, but the screen was dead. Black. Every electronic thing in the cab was dead. Even my watch had stopped. Then, without warning, the sphere split open. Not like glass shattering. It just unfolded, like it was peeling itself apart into 4 curved panels. And inside, there was darkness. Pure black, deeper than the night sky. And out of that darkness, something stepped forward. It wasn't tall, not the classic alien you'd expect from movies. It was small, maybe 4 feet, with thin arms and legs, and skin that looked pale gray, almost translucent in the headlights. Its head was too big for its body, and its eyes, Jesus, those eyes, they weren't just black. They looked like holes in reality, pulling me in. I couldn't move. My hands were locked on the wheel, but every muscle in my body refused to listen. It raised one hand, 3 fingers long and jointed strangely, and suddenly the truck door unlocked by itself with a loud click. The passenger door creaked open, though no wind blew. My breath caught in my throat as that thing tilted its head, studying me. I wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but all I could do was sit there, frozen like an insect under glass. Then the humming stopped. For the briefest second, everything went silent, so silent I could hear my own heartbeat pounding like a drum. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Something was inside my head. A voice, but not words. More like images, feelings pressed into my mind, faster than I could process. Cold, hunger, distance, and then a single clear thought, come with us. Before I could even think about saying no, a beam of white light shot from the sphere, flooding the cab. My vision went white, my body lifted from the seat, weightless, helpless. The last thing I saw before blacking out was my truck shrinking below me as I was pulled into the impossible, swallowed whole by the light. I came to with my back on something that felt like cold ceramic and a ceiling that made no sense. curved, seamless, and a soft pulsing from everywhere that felt like a heartbeat. For a terrifying second I thought I was still in the cab, but then realized there were no seams, no rivets, no fluorescent lights. Only this even glow that filled the space without a source. My limbs were heavy, not numb but uncooperative, like pins and ropes tied under my skin. I tried to turn my head and discovered I was strapped down by bands that looked like fabric but moved when I thought about them, tightening or loosening as if they were reading my intent. I focused on breathing slowly because panic was the only thing I could control. The air smelled faintly metallic and sweet, like pennies and apples. A low vibration thrummed through the floor, under me, through the bands, an unfamiliar rhythm that made my teeth buzz. Shapes moved beyond the glow, shadows that shifted too smoothly to be human. They didn't make sounds I could recognize. Instead, my head filled with a chorus of impressions. Cool light, distant stars, a memory of my mother's kitchen when I was 7, a rusty wrench on a trailer hitch. It felt invasive and intimate all at once, like someone rifling through a drawer of my life. One of the figures leaned over me. Up close it was smaller than it had looked from the road, its head angled curiously, those black eyes reflecting the light like wet stones. It raised a 3-fingered hand and touched the side of my head with the tip of a finger. The contact wasn't painful, but it sent a cascade of soundless images so fast my brain couldn't keep up. Roads folding up like maps, a toy truck spinning in a circle, the face of a woman I used to kiss goodbye before a trip. Then the voice, always that voice, arrived in a clear idea. Observe. My mouth moved before I realized I was speaking. Who are you? The question tasted ridiculous in the sterile air. There was no verbal response. Instead, a mild warmth spread through my chest and a single thought. Not what you call us. We study. The word study hit me in the way a splinter lodges, oddly specific. I wanted to be angry, to shout that nobody had the right to pick people off the highway, but the thought of resisting felt suddenly childish, like trying to stop a freight train with an outstretched hand. The band across my chest flexed and a portion of the floor beneath my feet slid open, revealing a shallow hollow filled with a viscous, clear gel. My toes brushed it, and the sensation was like dipping into lukewarm water that hummed. The figures moved with coordinated precision, not jerky or mechanical but efficient in a way that made my adrenaline ebb and my curiosity flare in spite of myself. One of them, smaller, with faint ridges along its forearms, produced a device that looked like 2 rings connected by a narrow band. No seams, no screws. It hovered over my forehead and the room filled with images again, but this time slower, as if unfolding film. My daughter when she was 5, the smell of diesel on winter mornings, a hospital room with a lamp on in the corner. I felt naked under their gaze, but with every image came another sensation. A calculation being made, a label placed somewhere inside me that I couldn't read. Time became unreliable. I couldn't tell if minutes or hours passed. At some point I lost track of what my body was doing and only registered the steady hum and a series of small clinical touches, on my hands, my chest, the back of my neck. They took samples in ways that left no cuts, no bleeding, only a cool pressure and a soft retracting like suction. After the first round of examinations they backed away and projected something into my head that looked like a star map, but it wasn't directions through space, it was a lattice of possibilities. Different timelines, different decisions. I saw versions of myself making other choices. A Mark who moved to Denver, a Mark who divorced, a Mark who never became a trucker. Each version flickered and the figures annotated them with symbols that I could not interpret, then focused on one and held it up like a specimen. The intimacy of it made bile rise in my throat. Why me? I managed to force the question out, my voice rasping. This time an image arrived without the filters. My rig parked under a lonely sky, the license plate number, the exact time I'd taken a left-off Route 83. It was as if they had recorded the small, ordinary geometry of my life and found it interesting. Transportable, the impression came. Adaptive. The feeling I had, worse than fear, was an acute awareness of being cataloged, turned into data. For hours, maybe seconds, the figures debated in my head. Not with words but with impressions of heat and light and equations that made my teeth ache to imagine. At one point a human voice, distant and distorted, threaded through. Subject 17 der. Proceed with containment. Hearing that made something inside me freeze. Subject. Containment. They weren't studying like scientists at a university. They were doing something more methodical, more institutional. The thought crashed over me with a cold clarity. I might not leave. Against that growing dread, I found a new kind of defiance. If they were recording, then they were leaving traces. If they left traces, maybe there was a way to send a sign back. I focused on my fingers and willed them to twitch. First nothing, then a faint tingling, like a promise. With effort that felt like lifting mountains, I managed one finger. A small, ridiculous motion, but it registered. One of the figures leaned in and its head tilted. There was a softness to the movement I couldn't place. Curiosity, perhaps, or disappointment. It touched my fingertip and there was a flash of color behind my eyes, a memory of a road sign for miles to go, humming with the same thread that had been present since I woke. They withdrew and the bands loosened, almost imperceptibly. The room shifted. The glow concentrated into a tunnel of light at the far end of the chamber and my body slid, unstrapped as if released by thought, toward it. My feet found the gel again and I stood, wobbly, like a man on a ship, and shuffled forward. The band across my wrist pulsed and a small tag embedded itself under my skin with a sensation like a pinprick. When the light engulfed me, the world refracted into 1,000 tiny mirrors and I saw, for a blink, my daughter's face overlaid on an endless starfield. Then I was moving, no sensation of acceleration, only a displacement of being. And when the light faded, I was standing in a corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and wet stone. The corridor opened into a large room where other humans, pale, in shock, some speaking in tongues I recognized from radio chatter in my sleep, were gathered, guarded by figures that kept careful distance. One of the humans caught my eye and mouthed a name, Eli. He had a beard threaded with gray and eyes that had seen too many nights in too many places. He put a hand to his chest and pointed at me, then pointed at a symbol etched into his forearm. 3 concentric circles. Instinctively, I touched the tag under my skin and felt a pulse. For the first time since I opened my eyes on that cold ceramic slab, I felt something like purpose, terrible and small. Find out where they are keeping us and find a way to tell someone who could do something. I started to move toward Eli, but the corridor lights dimmed and that voice, distorted, bureaucratic, filleted a sentence into my head. Containment ends. Transfer imminent. The floor beneath us answered with a low tone, and the walls, so smooth before, opened like the petals of a flower. Beyond them, beyond the threshold, there was a sight that made my throat close. A view of nothing I recognized as space, but also looked like a map of power lines stretching into infinity, threaded with lights and motion and something like awareness. Then the floor dropped. When the floor dropped, it didn't feel like falling the way it does on Earth. There was no rush of air, no stomach flipping into my throat, only the sensation of being unhooked from gravity, sliding downward through some invisible current. I blinked and the corridor, the other captives, Eli, all of it smeared away into darkness, then sharpened back into place in a chamber that looked startlingly different. This room wasn't alien in design. It was metallic, angular, with walls lined by panels I recognized. Rivets, ventilation grates, bulkhead doors. It looked human. My boots scraped against the floor. Real steel flooring, with warning stripes painted along the edges, yellow and black. Overhead, fluorescent fixtures buzzed faintly. I knew that sound. I'd heard it in warehouses, in service stations, in hangars. My pulse thumped harder because recognition was almost worse than the unknown. A symbol stenciled onto the far wall caught my eye. A white star within a circle. Military. U.S. military. My chest tightened. This wasn't some far-off galaxy. This was somewhere here. A voice boomed through an intercom, deep and clipped, unmistakably human. Subject 17DR has arrived. Prepare for secondary analysis. The alien figures faded into the background, slipping into shadows I couldn't follow, while men stepped into the chamber. Men in uniforms, not alien suits. Their fatigues were desert tan, their boots heavy. One of them had an American flag patch on his shoulder. My knees nearly buckled. I knew those uniforms. I'd seen them on bases before, on soldiers refueling at truck stops. The patch below the flag read, Edwards AFB. Another soldier barked an order. Restrain him. They weren't shocked by me being there, weren't panicked. They acted like this was protocol, routine. Two of them grabbed my arms and locked cold steel cuffs around my wrists. No telepathic bands, no humming fabric, just US-issue handcuffs. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Where am I? My voice cracked. One of the soldiers smirked like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. He didn't answer. Instead, they marched me out into a corridor lined with doors, each marked with codes and hazard symbols. The air smelled of recycled conditioning, the kind you find deep underground. I tried to memorize everything. The way the hallway bent, the faded numbering, the faint vibrations underfoot that suggested generators below. We took a turn and entered a larger chamber. And then my stomach flipped because I knew, without a doubt, where I was. I'd never been inside, but every conspiracy, every whispered truck stop story came rushing back. The desert-colored walls, the hidden corridors, the strange mix of military tech and alien machinery. Area 51. They dragged me past glass partitions where I glimpsed things I can't erase from my mind. A disc-shaped craft suspended by steel girders, its hull sliced open like a dissected animal. A chamber filled with tanks of green-blue fluid, silhouettes of bodies floating inside. Banks of monitors with scrolling lines of code, half of which looked like English, half like nothing I've ever seen. My heart hammered against my ribs. All the years of dismissing late-night callers on the CB, all the documentaries I'd laughed off, they weren't exaggerations. They weren't stories. This place was real, and I was standing in it. One of the soldiers leaned close to me as we passed a sealed door and muttered low, almost like he wanted me to hear. You weren't supposed to see this. Nobody ever is. His jaw clenched, and for a second I saw something in his eyes. Not cruelty, not even authority, but resignation. Like he was a prison guard who knew the inmates were innocent, but the system didn't care. They pushed me into another room, a smaller chamber with a steel table and bright overhead lights. A man in a lab coat stood waiting. He wasn't military, not exactly. His badge read Project Janus. He had thinning hair, glasses that reflected the fluorescence, and an expression so calm it chilled me. Mr. Davis, he said smoothly, like he was greeting a business partner. You've had quite a journey. My mouth went dry. Where am I? Why am I here? He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't touch the eyes. Let's just say you've been brought to a facility where cooperation is in your best interest. You've interacted with them. That makes you valuable. He didn't have to explain who them were. I felt it in my bones. My voice rose despite the cuffs biting into my wrists. They took me. They pulled me off the damn road. You work with them? The doctor tilted his head slightly, almost pitying. Work with them? No, not in the way you think. We study them the way they study you. You've seen how it works. They collect. We collect. That's balance. My chest heaved. This is Area 51, isn't it? For the first time, his smile faltered just slightly. He didn't confirm, didn't deny. Instead, he tapped a clipboard and nodded to the soldiers. Bring him to containment level 3. Let's see how compatible he really is. Compatible. The word rattled in my skull worse than subject. It meant I wasn't just here to be interrogated. I was here to be tested. They dragged me deeper into the labyrinth. As the doors hissed shut behind us, I caught another glimpse through reinforced glass. A hangar filled with rows of trucks, semis like mine, all stripped and gutted for parts. And in that instant, my stomach turned to stone. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even close to being the first. And I knew, with a kind of dreadful certainty, I might never be the last. The elevator hummed as it descended, a faint vibration under my boots. No buttons, no floor indicators, just the sensation of sinking into the earth. The soldiers flanked me, rifles slung but ready. My cuffs cut into my wrists, every rattle reminding me I wasn't in control. When the doors slid open, the air changed. Cooler, heavier, filled with the smell I knew from long-haul stops near old missile silos. Damp concrete and oil. Containment Level 3 wasn't like the other sections. It wasn't polished steel or glass partitions. It was rough, raw tunnels carved deep into bedrock, walls sweating moisture. Bright floodlights mounted overhead gave everything a sterile glare. Ahead, two massive blast doors loomed, each painted with hazard symbols. As they groaned open, I saw what they'd meant by containment. Inside was a cavernous chamber like an underground hangar. Cages, real cages, lined the walls. Not iron bars, but shimmering fields of light that crackled faintly when you looked too long. Behind them were shapes. Some were human, slumped against the glowing barriers, their faces pale, hollow. Others weren't. Figures too tall, too thin, with eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. A dozen species, a dozen prisoners. I stopped cold. My breath caught. Jesus Christ. One of the soldiers shoved me forward. Keep moving. They dragged me past cages where people, men and women, watched with dead eyes. One, a woman with shaved hair and bruised wrists, mouthed something to me as I passed. I didn't catch it, but the desperation in her stare told me everything. She'd been here a long time. Finally, they shoved me into an empty cell. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air tingled across my skin, and the barrier sealed behind me with a sharp hiss. The soldiers left without a word, boots clanging against the steel as the doors slammed shut. Silence fell. For a few minutes, I just stood there, hands trembling, staring at the glowing wall that separated me from freedom. Then a low voice came from the cell beside mine. First time down here? I turned. The man inside was gaunt, maybe late 50s, with a ragged beard and sunken cheeks. His eyes burned with something between madness and clarity. He pressed his hands against the barrier. Don't bother screaming. Nobody hears you down here. My throat felt raw. Where is this? What the hell is happening? He laughed, a bitter, rasping sound. You know where. You just don't want to admit it. Nevada desert. Groom Lake. They call it Dreamland. You know the name outsiders gave it. My stomach flipped. Area 51. He nodded once. Bingo. But it's not about UFOs flying overhead. It's about control. They trade with them. He jerked his chin toward a cage 3 rows down, where a tall, insect-like figure clung to the barrier, its faceted eyes glinting. Technology, knowledge, power. In exchange, we're the currency. People like us. My skin crawled. You're telling me the government, our own government, hands people over? His eyes bored into mine. Not hands. Collects. They let the ships take who they want, then reel them back in. Study us. Study them. Whatever keeps the machine turning. Rage surged in me, enough to drown the fear. That can't be true. They'd never. But even as I said it, I remembered the hangar filled with gutted trucks, the cold calm of the doctor, the endless cages. Of course it was true. Days, or maybe weeks, bled together in the cell. They fed us bland rations, monitored us with cameras. Sometimes the aliens came, sometimes the men in lab coats, sometimes both together, exchanging silent data across tools I couldn't understand. I learned that Eli, the man with the circles on his arm, had been here since 1987. The bearded neighbor claimed he was brought in during the Clinton years. None of us had left, until one night, the alarms blared shrill, deafening. The lights cut out, plunging the chamber into red emergency glow. For the first time, the cages flickered. One after another, their fields sputtered. Figures inside stirred, human and alien alike. Shouts echoed. Boots thundered down the tunnels. Something had gone wrong, very wrong. Eli appeared at my cell, eyes wild. His hand glowed faintly where the circles were tattooed. Now, when it fails, you run. The barrier shivered. I pressed against it. The hum weakened, and with a final crack, it collapsed. I stumbled forward into chaos. Prisoners surged. Soldiers shouted. Gunfire rattled. The insect-like alien tore through steel like paper, scattering men. I grabbed Eli's arm and ran, dodging between bodies, ducking as a spray of bullets sparked against concrete. We bolted down a side corridor. This way, Eli panted. Maintenance shafts. I've mapped them in my head for years. My lungs burned, legs shaking, but adrenaline kept me moving. We dove into a narrow tunnel, low enough that we had to crouch. The sirens were muffled here, the gunfire distant. At the far end, a ladder stretched upward. Eli pointed. Surface. I climbed, every rung slick with sweat and grime. My wrists throbbed where the cuffs had been. My ears rang with the memory of that humming, of alien voices, of the doctor's cold smile. When I reached the hatch, I heaved it open. Cool desert night air hit me in the face. Stars stretched overhead, infinite and sharp. I dragged myself out, Eli right behind me. We tumbled into the sand, gasping, alive. But as I looked back at the hatch, I froze. A figure stood there, framed by the glow below. Not a soldier. Not one of the insect-like things. A small gray being, the same as the one that had opened my truck door that night. Its eyes locked on mine, endless and black. And in my head, the voice whispered again, not over. Then the hatch slammed shut, sealing the desert once more. Eli grabbed my shoulder. Run. Don't stop. If you stop, they'll find you. We ran into the night, the Nevada desert swallowing us whole. I don't know how far we made it, or if freedom was even real beyond those sands. All I know is this Area 51 isn't a myth. It's a prison, and I was one of the inmates who almost didn't get out. If you're hearing this, remember, look up, look around. Because sometimes when the lights move above you, it isn't the sky you should be afraid of. It's what waits beneath your feet.